Imagine celluloid so dangerous governments treat it like a biological weapon. We think of film censorship as a harmless pair of scissors, snipping out a stray curse word or a brief moment of nudity, just to protect the innocent from the horrors of reality. But sometimes, a director captures something so profoundly disturbing, something so destructive to the social order, it must be eradicated. These aren't just movies, they are literal visual contraband. Today, we are opening the sealed archives to look at forbidden frames. The permanently erased minutes that tested our ultimate moral limits. Our first descent into this vault takes us back to 1932. Hollywood was still experimenting with the boundaries of visual terror. Director Todd Browning was given free rein to create ultimate horror. He delivered Freaks, a story set in a circus sideshow. Browning didn't use makeup or cheap special effects. He cast actual sideshow performers with severe physical deformities. For the climax, the performers crawl through the mud in a rainstorm. They are hunting down the beautiful and treacherous trapeze artist. In the original cut, the audience watched them corner her under a wagon. They were armed with knives, and a graphic mutilation followed. When this uncut version was screened, the reaction was truly catastrophic. People didn't just cover their eyes, they physically fled the theater. One woman threatened to sue MGM over the sheer visceral horror. She claimed the scene caused her to suffer a miscarriage, right there. Terrified by public backlash, studio executives ordered the film butchered. Nearly 30 minutes of footage were completely hacked away. But they didn't just store the cut negatives in a vault. They incinerated them, and the climax was literally burned to ash. It was permanently erased from human history, forever. Historians consider it a holy grail of lost cinema. A piece of art destroyed because the public stomach was weak. The 1930s dealt with cinematic nightmares by burning them to ash. The 1970s preferred to lock them in a dark room. We encounter a film its own studio treats like a cursed artifact. In 1971, Ken Russell released a film called The Devils, a historical drama detailing mass demonic possession and religious hysteria. The film was a total visual assault on the senses. But nothing prepared the censors for the infamous Rape of Christ sequence. This missing scene depicted a chaotic and hyper-sexualized frenzy. Completely nude, nuns desecrate a life-size statue of Christ. It was a hallucinatory nightmare of blasphemy and religious trauma. Government censorship boards around the world immediately banned the film. But the most aggressive censor was actually Warner Brothers itself. Fearing global boycotts, the studio executives seized the uncut negative. They didn't just trim the scene for a theatrical release. They locked the raw footage inside a heavily guarded corporate vault. Even today, over 50 years later, they absolutely refuse to release it, despite begging from film preservationists and legendary directors. The uncut version of The Devils sits forever in the dark. It is a prisoner of corporate fear to this very day. Sometimes the entity holding the scissors is just terrified financiers. Descending further, we find a film that tested the human gag reflex. In 1975, Pier Paolo Pasolini released his movie called Salo. It was based on the horrific novel by Marquis de Sade. Pasolini created the most sickening film ever committed to celluloid. The film is divided into literal circles of hell. But the circle of shit caused governments to panic completely. They treated the controversial movie like an active crime scene. The fascist elite force kidnapped victims to consume human feces. It was an elaborate and truly grotesque banquet sequence. Pasolini used a mixture of chocolate and orange marmalade for the effect. But the psychological implications were so deeply disturbing to audiences. The film was immediately confiscated by police across the world. It wasn't just banned, projectionists who showed it were actually arrested. Prints were seized by armed authorities, triggering a global moral panic. The tragedy of Salo bled out of the screen and into reality. Shortly before the premiere, Pasolini was brutally murdered. He was beaten and run over by his own car. The crime remains shrouded in political conspiracy to this day. The movie remains heavily censored or banned in dozens of nations. Governments feared the dark reflection of human depravity on screen. The final layer reveals the most fascinating form of censorship, when the creator himself begs for the footage to be locked away. In 1971, Stanley Kubrick released A Clockwork Orange, a chilling, ultra-violent masterpiece about free will and societal control. The film featured stylized, terrifying acts of home invasion and gang violence. It was all heavily choreographed to classical music. The British Censorship Board surprisingly passed the film completely uncut. It became a massive and deeply controversial hit. But then, reality began to mimic the fiction on screen. A wave of highly publicized crimes swept across the United Kingdom. Young men dressed in iconic white jumpsuits began committing copycat assaults. The media blamed the film, calling it an instructional manual for psychopaths. Suddenly, the violence wasn't just contained on the screen anymore. It was knocking directly on Kubrick's own front door. He began receiving specific death threats directed at his family. Terrified for his wife and daughters, Kubrick did the unthinkable. He demanded Warner Brothers completely withdraw the film from circulation. It was an unprecedented move in the history of cinema. The government didn't ban the movie, Stanley Kubrick banned it himself. For 27 years, it was illegal to screen it in British cinemas. It was only released again after Kubrick's death in 1999. It is the ultimate paradox of cinema, a truly powerful film. The mastermind had to build a cage to contain his own monster. We consume movies as entirely disposable entertainment. We sit in the dark, armed with popcorn, believing the screen is a safe window into a fictional world. But the archives of locked-away footage tell a different story. They remind us that the moving image possesses a terrifying power. When directors cross the invisible lines of morality, society responds. The response is swift, and it is absolutely merciless. The scissors come out, vaults are locked, and evidence is incinerated. But the absence of those frames speaks louder than the footage. Those erased minutes are just a dark mirror, showing us what humanity is too fragile or terrified to see.